On Friday night, April 21st, 2023, Tucker Carlson ended his show the way he always does. Calm voice, small smile. We'll be back on Monday. But by Monday morning, he was gone. There was no final episode, no farewell, or even an explanation. Just 16 words from Fox News. Fox News Media and Tucker Carlson have agreed to part ways. The most watched man in cable news, 3 million viewers a night, the top-rated primetime program in all of cable, deleted from the schedule between breakfast and lunch. 6 days earlier, Fox had paid $787.5 million to settle a defamation lawsuit. That lawsuit had forced something into the open that Fox could not pay to bury. Thousands of internal texts from inside the network. And in those texts, Tucker Carlson was keeping a secret from his Fox audience, and that secret could change how they see him. On November 3rd, 2020, during the election night, Fox News called Arizona for Joe Biden. It was the first network to do it, ahead of every competitor. And the call was correct, but it was also a catastrophe. Fox didn't expect what that call would do to its own audience. The audience didn't just disagree, they left. They switched to a smaller rival called Newsmax. And within days, Newsmax primetime numbers were spiking in ways the network had never seen. And inside Fox, the man running the senior Washington bureau put the crisis into one sentence in a text to a colleague. It's remarkable how weak ratings make good journalists do bad things. That text would surface 2 years later, inside a lawsuit. But wait a bit, because I'm going to get to that part. The thing is, Fox had not lost the election night audience because it called Arizona for Biden. It lost them because I think the audience was never really loyal to Fox. They were loyal to a worldview, and Fox had just stopped delivering it. Fox needed someone who could hold its audience, and they had just met the man. Tucker Carlson was already the network's most watched host. After Bill O'Reilly was pushed out over sexual harassment settlements in April of 2017, Tucker had inherited the 8 p.m. slot and grown it into the highest-rated primetime program on all of cable by July 2020. And after election night 2020, he became something more than a ratings leader. He became the bridge between Fox and an audience that Fox had just enraged. The audience that had turned to Tucker in November of 2020 trusted him, and Tucker delivered on that trust. He gave them doubt about Dominion. He echoed their thoughts that asking questions about the elections was their constitutional right, and to dismiss those questions was itself a form of dishonesty. He connects the audience to Sidney Powell and her claims about rigged machines. He said he hoped that she'd come forward with the details. That's the Tucker Carlson his audience believed in. The problem is that Tucker Carlson also had a phone, and on that phone he was saying something else entirely. It started within days of the Arizona call. On November 16th, 2020, Tucker texted a producer after watching Sidney Powell make her claims about rigged Dominion machines, the stolen election, and a conspiracy of historic scale. Sidney Powell is lying, he wrote, and those texts were just the beginning. 2 days later, he texted Lauren Ingram. Sidney Powell is lying, by the way. I caught her. It's insane. He called Powell an unguided missile and dangerous as hell. Ingram agreed. She replied, Sidney is a complete nut. No one will work with her. Ditto with Rudy. Then Tucker added, it's unbelievably offensive to me. Our viewers are good people and they believe it. Did you catch that? Those texts showed that Tucker cared about his audience and found the thought of them being deceived offensive. At least that's what I personally got from the text. But what I find absurd is that he kept booking her anyway and never told his audience what he truly thought. And Powell was only the beginning. By January 4th, 2021, 2 days before the Capitol riot, Tucker was texting about Trump himself. We are very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights. I truly can't wait. In the same exchange, he declared, I hate him passionately. 3 days later, the morning after January 6th, he texted his producer, he's a demonic force, a destroyer. And in a separate message from the same period, he assessed the previous 4 years with a bluntness that never made it to the broadcast. There isn't really an upside to Trump. So every night, Tucker Carlson performed one version of himself in front of 3 million people watching him. Every night, he was being another version of himself with friends and coworkers over the phone. He had to live with both versions at once. For 2 years, that arrangement held. Tucker kept broadcasting, the texts kept accumulating. Nobody outside a small circle of producers and colleagues knew what was in them. Then in March 2021, Dominion Voting Systems sued Fox News for $1.6 billion. They filed in court that Fox had knowingly broadcast false claims about its machines. The lawsuit set in motion a discovery process. This wasn't a leak or a whistleblower scenario. Fox had a legal obligation and no choice but to hand over its internal communications. Tens of thousands of messages, unfiltered, whatever was on those servers. The texts Tucker had been writing since November 2020 were now a part of court record. And what the file showed was not one host having a bad night. It was the whole infrastructure of the network. Tucker, Hannity, Ingram, executives, producers, all of them privately said the opposite of what they were broadcasting. Dominion's lawyers put it plainly in their brief. From the top down, Fox knew the Dominion stuff was total BS. And that matters a lot, because it means Tucker was not a rogue element inside a credulous institution. He was just the most visible example of a network filled with people who didn't believe what they were saying. The lawsuit exposed his secret and made it impossible to defend Tucker. By late 2022, with the Dominion trial approaching, a second pressure was building inside the network. Abby Grossberg had joined Tucker's show in September 2022 as head of booking, moving over from Maria Bartiromo's program. She lasted less than 5 months before seeking medical leave for anxiety and depression. Then, in March of 2023, she filed a lawsuit. She described what she had found when she arrived. Images of Nancy Pelosi in a bikini pinned around the office walls. A senior producer with an obscenity written on a mirror on his desk. Jewish colleagues mocked for their faith. Women dismissed and underpaid. When she'd complained to a supervisor about it, his response was simple: "We're just following Tucker's tone." That part bothered me because Fox staff were accusing Tucker of another thing entirely, and it looked much darker than texts talking smack about Sidney Powell and Donald Trump. So, which is the real Tucker? As you ponder your answer, like this video and subscribe to Top Rewind. I'm going to tell you stories that others are afraid to tell. Fox fired Grossberg after she filed. She sued them for that too, adding a second case alleging Fox's own lawyers had pressured her to give misleading testimony in the Dominion proceedings. Fox would eventually settle both suits for $12 million. And back to Tucker himself. At some point during the Dominion proceedings, he found out Fox's lawyers had convinced a judge to keep his most damaging texts redacted in the public filings. He wasn't relieved. He told colleagues he wanted the world to know what he thought of Fox management, the vulgar messages about senior executives, the contempt that he'd been carrying for years while smiling through the commercial break. I got to admit, I find this part intriguing. Tucker went from a man who knew his audience was being deceived and didn't publicly do anything other than send private texts, to acting like he wanted to bring the network that allowed this down. Had he decided that he was bigger than the network that signed his checks? On April 17, 2023, Fox's board reviewed a text Tucker sent on January 7, 2021. The New York Times would later report its contents through multiple sources close to the case. In it, Tucker described watching a video of what he calls Trump supporters attacking someone on the street. He wrote about a violent impulse he felt watching it, but caught himself and pulled back. Then, in the middle of the text, he wrote a line about how white men fight. The board read all of this and saw a legal catastrophe. Tucker was expected to testify, and the trial was soon, and this text was still in the discovery file. The board authorized Fox to retain Watchell, Lipton, Rosen & Katz, one of the most powerful corporate law firms in the country, to investigate Tucker's conduct. Tucker, who helped Fox keep their audience, was being formally investigated by his own bosses' outside lawyers. But still, he was on air every night. Now, I don't want to make assumptions for him, but I have this instinct that he must have felt the clock ticking on his time with Fox. On April 18th, Fox settled with Dominion for $787.5 million. Tucker never testified because the trial never happened. Fox could breathe easier now, but the settlement didn't close the file on Tucker. It opened the question, what should Fox do about a host who is averaging 3 million viewers a night, is generating lawsuits, has privately raged at management in messages that could surface at any moment, and told his colleagues that he wants the world to read what he really thinks of the people running the network that he works for. Well, Fox's answer took exactly 6 days. On April 24th, Lachlan Murdoch and Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott authorized Tucker's firing. There was no call to him advance by most accounts, and his executive producer, Justin Wells, 15 years at Fox, was also out. By that afternoon, the 8 p.m. slot is being filled by a rotating cast. But remember, the audience Tucker had built was not loyal to the Fox News brand. It was loyal to Tucker himself personally. They were loyal to his voice, his framing, and his way of looking at the world. Fox had assumed for 7 years that those were the same thing. They weren't. When it fired Tucker, it didn't reclaim the audience, it released it. Some went to Newsmax, some followed Tucker directly to X, some stopped watching cable news entirely. The building stayed open, the viewers walked out with the man they came to see. Brian Kilmeade filled in that first night when Tucker left. The slot drew 2.6 million viewers, decent by any normal standard, except Tucker had averaged over 3 million in his final week. Within 2 weeks, the 8 p.m. audience in the key 25 to 54 advertising demographic dropped roughly 50%. Newsmax, which had been polling 146,000 viewers in that hour, hit 531,000 the night Tucker was fired. Tucker did not disappear quietly. Within days, his attorneys sent Fox a letter claiming the network had broken its promises to him. They claimed this was a breach of contract that should free him from his non-compete clause. So he launched a new show on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Fox sent a cease and desist. He kept on going anyway. And eventually the two sides reached a quiet arrangement. 4 months after the firing, he sat down with Donald Trump, the man he'd privately called a demonic force and a destroyer, for an interview on X timed deliberately to run opposite Fox's first Republican primary debate. Trump skipped the debate to do it. Tucker campaigned for him through 2024. He was at the Republican National Convention, speaking from the stage. He spent that year in the room where it counted. And then on April 21st, 2026, 3 years after his last segment for Fox, Tucker Carlson sat down with his brother Buckley and said this: "I do think it's a moment to wrestle with our own consciences. We'll be tormented by it for a long time. I will be. And I want to say I'm sorry for misleading people." Before the apology, Trump had 2 weeks earlier, on April 9th, posted on Truth Social that Tucker and other critics have one thing in common: low IQs. Tucker's son, who had been working as deputy press secretary in Vice President Vance's office, had already given notice in December. He left in April. The timing looked connected. According to Politico, it wasn't. You could read the apology as a change of heart, but when you could read the January 21 text that Tucker wrote about Trump, you'll notice that the apology was not new. The difference was that in 2026, he said what he thought to a camera instead of through text. Fox News survived firing him. The institution absorbed the cost and kept moving. Tucker Carlson was only removed from the building, but not his audience. The secrets he kept are now out in the open. But I keep coming back to the same thought. The man who performed one version of himself for 3 million people every night hasn't stopped performing. The audience just got bigger. I'll see you next time on Top Rewind.